After all my years playing all these games, one thing that continues to come up consistently, I guess, is this idea of being overpowered, being too OP. And on the one hand, I understand this. I understand how somebody would level this at somebody in a negative way to say that you are so overpowered that you have not had to put any work into actually learning the game. You are just button mashing your way through and you're not experiencing the game. Then again, who fucking cares? You experience the game however you, you fucking want to. But then I think there's being overpowered in the sense that you know the game so well and you're able to use the items that the game gives you in such a way against the game that you become overpowered as a player. And I think these are two different kinds of. I think one is more insulting and one is more complimentary in a sense. And that's sort of the point of this, is to look at the idea of being overpowered across several boss fights and just have a general discussion about, well, what does that mean? And at what point do you become overpowered? And how dependent is that on skill level? So we start out with Father Gascoigne. Now here, I'm blood level 10 with a +0 saw cleaver. I have the hunter pistol and I'm using the music box. So I can parry and I can stagger him with the music box. So I'm not doing very high damage, just, I can't remember what the skill stat is on military veteran, like 10, something like that. So, not really that high. Now, you could run Central Yarnum for hours and hours and hours and hours to like max stats and do Father Gascoigne in like a second by just mashing R1 a couple of times. The problem with that is I would say that this would make you very OP because you don't have to learn anything, right? On the far end of what we're talking about, I think this would be objectively overpowered, right? But on the other end of that, can we say that this is maybe underpowered? I mean, I haven't leveled. I'm still at blood level 10. I haven't leveled my weapon. I haven't done anything, and yet I seem to be stomping his ass. But does this mean that it is contingent or dependent on how well I know Father Gascoigne and how well I know this fight? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I think we can take this maybe a little. We could dial it back a little bit and say, well, let's just take away parries altogether. Okay, so I don't have a pistol. I just ran Central Yarnum. I got the Saw Spear. I didn't go to the Dream to get anything. Just a mad dash to Father Gascoigne. So here all I'm using is the music box to stagger him, to do the charged R2 and the visceral and everything. And yet, there are some that would claim that using the music box in general makes you overpowered because you get these moments of like almost like free hits against Father Gascoigne, and it makes it sort of bullshit. But again, does this depend on your skill level? Here, I think maybe, if I've understood some people correctly, essentially, by using the music box, you are giving yourself opportunities to not learn the fight, to not learn Father Gascoigne. And in that sense, you are depriving yourself of an opportunity to learn, therefore you ought not to use it. But then later claim that once you're at a certain skill level, you don't need the music box anyway, so why use it at all? So is it there just as a crutch for new players? I wouldn't say it's a crutch, necessarily. And I wouldn't say that it makes you OP, unless you're at a certain skill level where you actually don't need it. But let's drop it down even more. So this is a blood level 4 fight against Amelia. And I am using a +3 saw cleaver and beast blood pellets and fire paper. So again, using items in the game against the game. This is about as close as Bloodborne gets to an RTS setup, so Red Tearstone setup from Dark Souls. And I have seen people say that this is an overpowered setup. The problem with that is that in order to pull something like that off, you have to have skill and knowledge of the game, because you can't get hit all that much, when you're doing a setup like that. But again, does something like that make you overpowered in a negative sense, to where you are doing like a bullshit run of the game? Or does it make you overpowered because you have such a high knowledge of the game? So here is Bloodstarved Beast, +0 everything, blood level 4. So to piggyback on top of using items, the cocktails, the beast blood pellets and everything, is this OP? Is this bullshit? I mean, is it trivializing Bloodstarved Beast to the point that it's not necessary? I should probably say, by the way, that if you're doing blood level 4, you don't really want to go after visceral attacks because your skill stat is so low that it doesn't matter. So it's going to work to your benefit to just do charged R2s or transformation attacks. But using those items against the game in a way that is strategic and knowledgeable. OP? I don't know. So these are my stats against Maria. We've gone up a little bit. Blood level 420. I've run the FRC chalices to get some decent gems. Not the best in the game, but decent. I have 3 Clawmark runes that we'll just say they give my visceral attacks a boost. So this is a build that somebody would look at, and I think this is like new game 5 or 6, and think, Jesus fucking Christ, this is overpowered as fuck. On the one hand, I agree, and on one, I don't. I think it depends on who's using it. So if you give this build to somebody who doesn't know Maria, would the fight go as it goes? Would they know how to do this next little bit here where I do a transformation attack followed right up with a parry and then a visceral to send her right into phase 3, I believe. Skips phase 2 altogether. I don't know. But then I think you could come back on that and say, well, if you know how to do all that, you don't need a build like this. So maybe you should just dial it back. Maybe your build is too overpowered. But then we get into the discussion of how much should a decent player handicap themselves. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion to have to figure out, well, at what point am I really OP? And is there a certain point where somebody can have, and I am nowhere near this level, but I think some players are like Squilla or Faraz or Happy Hob or Lobos, where you're so good at the game that there really isn't that much of a handicap, you know. But I think Orphan is, just for me, just in my very personal opinion, a good example of how really there is no OP build sometimes. Because it really doesn't matter what you bring to Orphan. If you don't know how to fight Orphan, you're just going to have to get incredibly lucky. I think this is the same with like ONS or Sword Saint or Freed, Soul Ascender, Suralon, all these bosses. I mean, you see right here. I mean, god damn it. he almost two-shots me. You know, and never mind how much damage I'm doing from viscerals. Being able to get to a point where you can visceral Orphan takes knowledge of Orphan. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I've seen discussed since, god damn, I guess since I started playing Dark Souls, you know, and I think we all remember, most of us anyway, playing Dark Souls and then coming across the skeletons and thinking, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't go this way. So there are skill checks in the game, and there are like these sort of unstated level caps, you know, where you know that, okay, there's a wall here, and I need to be at a higher level before I progress. And you could get your build or whatever to a point early on to where it's not a challenge, so that you don't have to learn anything. But I think Orphan is an example, and you know, several other bosses, where it really just comes down to how well do you know them. Because your build's not going to save you. There is no overpowered. You know, there is just being good or not. You know, at some point you just have to get good. Okay. But I think it's an interesting discussion to have about these games. I really do. And personally, I think people should be able to play however they fucking want. I don't give a shit, to be honest. But I do think people benefit the most from really learning the game and becoming overpowered because of how well you know the game and how good you are, so that eventually you are just an overpowered player and your build becomes inconsequential and just a vessel for how much fun you want to have.